Unsolved true crime cases are always an interesting subject to dive into, due to some of the unbelievable moments that these unexplained mysteries contain. Some of the strangest true crime stories have left everyone involved in their investigations baffled, and to this day, no closure has been found for the victims or the families who were affected. Number 5. On the 15th of August 2000, 28-year-old Julie Cooper had just finished having her lunch break, and she was walking back to work via a trail near Norfolk County Hall and an industrial estate at Europa Way in Norwich, England. During her lunch break, Julie, who worked as a trainee accountant at the C.S. Lampert's company at the time, had gone home to eat some of her daughter's birthday cake from the previous day. She was returning to work at around 1:15 p.m., but in an instant, her day and her life changed for the worst. Seemingly out of nowhere, she was attacked by a person with a sharpened blade who attempted to steal her purse, but rather than make their getaway with the stolen property, they used the blade to cause harm to Julie's face before finally fleeing on foot. Julie says that she has no recollection of the actual attack that happened more than 2 decades ago, but the lingering physical and emotional effects have stayed with her ever since. She's made a heartfelt appeal to anyone with information in her case to come forward, but she's left baffled as to why the attacker chose her as a victim and why he didn't just leave with her purse. She has since gone on to become the head of accounts for the Norwich and Norfolk Hospitals charity and is living a fulfilling life, but she stated that she and her family need answers to find some closure after the shocking incident. Investigators stated that Julie's clothing and glasses case that she had with her at the time were sent to be forensically tested, and CCTV from a nearby gas station, which showed a pair of feet fleeing from the area, has been enhanced, but despite interviewing 4 people, no suspects have emerged. Anyone who may have seen anything that day, or who has any information on Julie's unsolved case, has been asked to contact Andy Guy at 019-534-2381, or email unsolvedcasereviews at norfolk.ppn.police.uk. If you'd prefer to remain anonymous, you can contact Crime Stoppers at 0800-555-111. Number 4. The true crime story involving Ruth Whitman took place in December of 1959 in Colony, New York. Not much is known about the 18-year-old's life before the incident, as she didn't have many friends, but it is known that she lived with her fiancé, Nelson Paul, at the time. Adding to her case, there are conflicting reports as to Ruth's personality. Some people described her as a shy and quiet woman, while others have stated she was a heavy drinker who often visited less than desirable areas of the city, though none of these accounts have been verified. On the morning of the 8th of December, Ruth was found deceased on Sand Creek Road. She'd been dealt a blow to the back of her head, though it was later ruled that her life was ended due to drowning. The medical examiner who dealt with Ruth's case stated that he believed she'd received the blow to the head which left her unconscious. Believing that she had passed away, her attacker then left her face down in a drainage ditch, where she unfortunately drowned. There was no evidence of any further assault, but investigators believed that Ruth was redressed at some point, since they found no biological material on the outer layers of her clothing. Her shoes had been left untied, and the buttons on her dress were found to be undone. On that night, many of the local residents were outside watching as firefighters attempted to subdue a fire that had broken out at 63 Lancaster Street, and investigators were certain that someone in the crowd could serve as a witness in Ruth's case. But they were met with conflicting accounts, with some people saying that she had been alone, while others stated that she was in the company of an unknown man who was in his early 20s. When Nelson was questioned, it was found that he'd been at work at the time, providing him with a solid alibi, and he was quickly ruled out as a suspect. Today, it's believed that Ruth was on her way to meet Nelson, and she passed by the fire to get to the White Tower restaurant where she worked. But what happened after that remains an unsolved mystery. Most of the evidence that was collected that morning has vanished over the years, and hence cannot be sent for forensic testing. Investigators now believe that the case will only be solved via testimony from a witness or a confession from the perpetrator. However, students at the Cold Case Analysis Center have started to work their way through the many leads and witness statements, hoping to bring a close to this obscure true crime story. After interviewing Nelson, they confirmed that he was definitely not a suspect, but they did discover that serial killer Robert Garrow had been living just a few blocks away from the crime scene at the time, and it's believed that they may have known each other. Garrow is now a suspect in this unsolved mystery, and the CCAC students are hoping to bring a close to Ruth's strange true crime story. Number 3. Due to advancements in forensic technology, 18-year-old Susan Margaret Long's true crime case is periodically reviewed in hopes that there will be new avenues to explore. But this unsolved mystery is yet to be deciphered. Susan Margaret Long had lived in Norfolk, England all of her life, and at the time of her passing, she was living with her parents. She was working as a clerk at Norwich Union in Norwich, and had a boyfriend who also lived in the city. On the 10th of March, 1970, Susan accompanied her boyfriend to the Gala Dance Hall in Norwich, and she left at around 10:25 in order to catch a bus home. Fellow passengers confirmed that she did indeed get on the bus, getting off again in Aylsham. At around 5:15 on the 11th of March 1970, Susan's body was found by a milkman on the Berg Road, approximately 1.5 miles from Aylsham Marketplace. During the Scotland Yard's investigation, it was found that she had likely been driven to the area, though it wasn't known whether she went voluntarily or was forced to do so. The cause of her passing was found to be strangulation, and after forensic testing was done on the biological material found at the scene, samples were collected from men who lived in the area. It was also discovered that there were car paint flakes on Susan's clothing. The paint had originally been blue, but had been resprayed in a metallic maroon color, though this brought no further progress in the unsolved case. Susan's case was reopened in 2003 and again in 2010, when investigators did research on DNA familial comparisons. But no suspect was identified, and her unsolved case remains a true crime mystery to this day. However, DNA identification techniques are still being used in an attempt to find the culprit, and it's possible that in the future, Susan's attacker will face the consequences of his or her actions. Number 2. The unsolved case of the murder of Amy Deisman started on the 12th of September 1987 in New Richmond, Southwest Ohio. Amy was attending Northern Kentucky University and had just started a new job at a local convenience store called Merwin's Stop and Go. On the 12th of September, she was working her first overnight shift alone, and in the early hours of the following morning, a customer encountered the shop to find it seemingly empty. However, when they looked behind the shop's counter, they found Amy deceased. Someone had ended her life with a firearm just minutes prior, as the last sale was made at 5:28 a.m., and the 911 call was made by the customer at 5:30 a.m. Police were called to the scene at 5:38, and upon arriving at the store, found that there was no weapon and they were at a loss as to who may have been responsible. The Stop and Go store offered a cash reward of $10,000 to anyone who had information that led to the arrest of Amy's killer, but no witnesses came forward, and it remains an unsolved mystery. All that is known is that there was a witness, but they inexplicably disappeared without helping to advance the case. A man named Scott Lee Austin became a suspect, and in 1989, a search warrant was executed at his house, although it could never be proved that he was responsible for the crime. A Claremont County prosecutor stated in 1993 that Austin was still a suspect after all that time. However, in August of '93, prosecutor Donald White filed a motion to have charges of aggravated murder against Austin dismissed, and there's been no further progress in Amy's true crime case, and her passing may forever remain an unexplained mystery. Number 1. In June of 1985, 19-year-old Cassandra Rhines became the subject of a true crime mystery when she inexplicably disappeared without a trace, and her weird true crime story remains an unsolved case decades later. Cassandra lived in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and one afternoon in June of that year, she made a call to one of her friends to confirm that she would be attending her goddaughter's birthday party, which was being held the following day. But when the time for the party came, Cassandra never showed up, and none of her friends or family ever saw or heard from her again. She had inexplicably disappeared, and despite the best efforts of investigators and her family to find her, she remained missing, and her disappearance became an obscure true crime story. Initially, investigators focused on a photo showing an unknown man with Cassandra, and they later learned that they had been living together at the time. The man was eventually identified as Donald McSwain, but by that time he had passed away. Other leads that came in suggested that Cassandra had been working as an exotic dancer, but it isn't known whether this played any role in her life being ended. Then, in May of 2014, an off-duty employee from the Lake County Sheriff's Office found Cassandra's remains in a secluded part of the Gooseberry State Park while training his dogs. The area where she was discovered is about 200 miles from the area where she'd been living at the time that her life was ended. At first, it was uncertain who the remains belonged to, but thanks to a DNA sample that was submitted by Cassandra's sister in 2013 to the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, it was confirmed that it was indeed Cassandra who was found. To this day, investigators believe that Cassandra's life was ended elsewhere, and that her remains were transported to the park where she was left and eventually found decades later. The mystery of Cassandra's passing still remains an unsolved case, but investigators are actively involved and are hoping that someone who has information will come forward in the future to bring some clarity and closure to her family and friends. They have appealed to anyone who may have seen something that day, or who has any information to come forward by contacting the Lake County Sheriff's Office at 218-834-8385. Alternatively, you can contact the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension at 651-793-7000. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.